Okay, let's get into a little bit of G.I. Gurdjieff's philosophy, and we'll be pulling from P.D. Ouspensky's book, In Search of the Miraculous. And Ouspensky was a student under G.I. Gurdjieff, and in this video we'll be touching on one of his philosophical theories within this book, and throughout this video channel we'll be touching on more aspects of Gurdjieff philosophy, but for now we'll just be dealing with Gurdjieff's belief of the four bodies, and essentially what his belief on the four bodies were, the four levels of self that needed to be understood and mastered to obtain a true realization of self and a true manifest of will from there. So let's get a little bit into Ouspensky's book and a little bit of Gurdjieff's teachings to him. And in his book, he often refers to Gurdjieff simply as G. So in some of the text, he'll be referred to as G. So let's get into it. In order to understand what man is at the present time, that is, at the present level of development, it is necessary to imagine to a certain extent what he can be, that is, what he can attain. Only by understanding the correct sequence of development possible will people cease to ascribe to themselves what, at present, they do not possess, and what, perhaps, they can only acquire after great effort and great labor. So essentially, instead of getting caught up in who you currently may be and what your weaknesses and failures may be, more focused on who you desire to be, who you can be, and how can you become that. According to an ancient teaching, traces of which may be found in many systems, old and new, a man who has attained the full development possible for man, a man in the full sense of the word, consists of four bodies. These four bodies are composed of substances which gradually become finer and finer, mutually interpenetrate one another, and form four independent organisms, standing in a definite relationship to one another but capable of independent action. The reason why it is possible for the four bodies to exist in that human organism, that is, the physical body, has such a complex organization that under certain conditions a new independent organism can grow in it, affording a much more convenient and responsive instrument for the activity of consciousness than the physical body. The consciousness manifested in this new body is capable of governing it, and it has full power and full control over the physical body. In this second body, under certain conditions, a third body can grow, again having characteristics of its own. The consciousness manifested in this third body has the full power and control over the first two bodies, and the third body possesses the possibility of acquiring knowledge inaccessible either to the first or to the second body. In the third body, under certain conditions, a fourth can grow, which differs as much from the third as the third differs from the second and the second from the first. The consciousness manifested in the fourth body has full control over the first three bodies and itself. Now let's get into what these four bodies are, as essentially these are steps towards self-evolution in Gurdjieff's beliefs. The first is the physical body. In Christian terminology, the carnal body. The second, in Christian terminology, is the natural body. The third is the spiritual body, and the fourth, in the terminology of esoteric Christianity, is the divine body. In theosophical terminology, the first is the physical body, the second is the astral, the third is the mental, and the fourth, the casual. In the terminology of certain Eastern teachings, the first body is the carriage body, the second body is the horse, feelings, desire, the third, the driver, the mind, and the fourth, the master, I, consciousness, will. Such comparisons and parallels may be found in most systems and teachings which recognize something more in man than the physical body. But almost all these teachings, while repeating in a more or less familiar form the definitions and the divisions of the ancient teaching, have forgotten or omitted its most important feature, which is that man is not born with the finer bodies, and that they can only be artificially cultivated in him provided favorable conditions, both internal and external, are present. In other words, you're not born at your best. You have to be cultivated through your own self-struggle, self-conquering, self-exploration, and self-growth to obtain the four bodies, to attain your higher consciousness, to attain a knowledge of yourself and a knowledge of who you can be. So all these things must be worked towards. And once again, just to interject politics into it real fast, if you have a surrounding that's more conducive to the mentality of striving for more, striving to become more, striving to know more, to be more, then you have the more likelihood of more people, maybe not the majority, but more so than today, more people desiring these things and accomplishing these things, and thus benefiting humanity altogether. The astral body is not an indispensable implement for man. It is a great luxury which only a few can afford. A man can live quite well without an astral body. His physical body possesses all the functions necessary for life. So most people are going through life only essentially getting to their second body at most, in Gurdjieff's mind. And I think when you look around at society, how most people live their lives and how much do they ponder what life is and who they are and what life should be lived for. I mean, I think it would be accurate to say the majority of people, if we're going to define the self-awareness and self-evolution of people in the four-body definition of Gurdjieff, then we could say most of these people live within the second body for the most part. A man without an astral body may even produce the impression of being a very intellectual or even spiritual man, and may deceive not only others but also himself. This applies still more, of course, to the mental body and the fourth body. Ordinary man does not possess these bodies or their corresponding functions, but he often thinks and makes others think that he does. The reasons for this are, first, the fact that the physical body works with the same substances of which the higher bodies are composed. Only these substances are not crystallized in him, do not belong to him. And secondly, it has all the functions analogous to those of the higher bodies, those of, that is, the body which bears the causes of its actions within itself, is independent of external causes, and is the body of will. The chief difference between the functions of a man possessing the physical body only and the functions of the four bodies is that, in the first case, the functions of the physical body govern all other functions. In other words, everything is governed by the body, which in its turn is governed by the external influences. In the second case, the command or control emanates from the higher body. So if people are stuck within their first body or even their second body, then essentially, especially if most people are living within only their physical body and not even their intellectual body or even their higher self, then you will have a people that are mainly led by their passions, that are mainly responses to stimuli around them. And this is what you see in low IQ peoples, because unfortunately, even to make the transition even to the third body of the mental, you would at least have to have some intellectual capability. So this is typically why you'll see people, if most people are living within their first and second body through their whole lives, you could see how society could be brought about where the primary concern of people are the material. Essentially, they are being responses to stimuli. That is their existence. They respond to the stimuli. They have a desire for comfort, a desire for self-gratification, a desire for scratching whatever itch they may have. And this is why we see the strength of the vice industry in modernity. This is why we see things like obesity plaguing modern man. It's because these people who only live within their first bodies are simply nothing more than responses to the stimuli around them. Essentially, Gurdjieff is saying, until you can conquer all four bodies, until you can encompass all four bodies and have them working all towards one purpose within you, that you never have control of yourself. You never are yourself. It's only when you understand your higher self can you become yourself, essentially. And most people go through life from birth to death only living within the first or second body, but never getting to a higher understanding of self. All right, back to the book. In the first case, said G, that is, in relation to the functions of the man of the physical body only, the automation depends upon external influences. And the next three functions depend upon the physical body and the external influences it receives. Desires or aversions. I want, I don't want, I like, I don't like. That is, functions occupying the place of the second body depend upon accidental shocks and influences. Thinking, which corresponds to the functions of the third body, is an entirely mechanical process. Will is absent in ordinary mechanical man. He has desires only, and a greater or lesser permanence of desires and wishes is called a strong or a weak will. In the second case, that is, in relations to the functions of the four bodies, the automatism of the physical body depends upon the influences of the other bodies. Instead of the discordant and often contradictory activity of different desires, there is one single I, whole, indivisible, and permanent. There is individuality, dominating the physical body and its desires and able to overcome both its reluctance and its resistance. Instead of the mechanical process of thinking, there is consciousness, and there is a will, that is, a power, not merely composed of various, often contradictory desires belonging to different I's, but issuing from the consciousness and governed by individuality or a single and permanent I. Only such a will can be called free, for it is independent of accident and cannot be altered or directed from without. If a man gives way to all his desires or panders to them, there will be no inner struggle in him, no friction, no fire. But if, for the sake of attaining a definite aim, he struggles with desires that hinder him, he will then create a fire which will gradually transform his inner world into a single whole. So man must be in a perpetual state of motion. There has to be this inner struggle with yourself to achieve more within yourself, and collectively to achieve more as a society. The never-ending climb. To be more tomorrow than what you were today. This drive in man, this Faustian spirit in man. Without this, man becomes sedentary. And when we become sedentary, we become comfortable, we become soft, we become fat, and we die. This is not man's purpose. The inner struggle, the battle with the self to become more of yourself, is a constant theme not only on this channel, but throughout numerous ancient philosophies and pre-modern religions as well. Man contains within him the possibility of evolution, but the evolution of humanity as a whole, that is the development of all these possibilities in all men, or in most of them, or even a large number of them, is not necessary for the purposes of the earth or of the planetary world in general, and it might, in fact, be injurious or fatal. There exists, therefore, special forces of planetary character which oppose the evolution of large masses of humanity and keep it at the level it ought to be. The man must understand this. His evolution is necessary only to himself. No one else is interested in it, and no one is obliged or intends to help him. On the contrary, the forces which oppose the evolution of large masses of humanity also oppose the evolution of individual men. A man must outwit them, and one man can outwit them. Humanity cannot. So he's saying this self-evolution, this reaching this fourth body, as he would put it, is not something you would ever expect for the masses, but for the minority instead. You would assume he comes to this conclusion with just looking at all of history, saying this has usually been the case, that the masses of people have mainly lived within, in his definitions, the first and second bodies. And then some have lived within the third, and even less, encompassing all four bodies. You will understand later on that all these obstacles are very useful to a man. This is him lecturing his group here. If they did not exist, they would have been created intentionally, because it is by overcoming obstacles that man develops those qualities he needs. This is the basis of the correct view of human evolution. There is no compulsory mechanical evolution. Evolution is the result of a conscious struggle. Nature does not need this evolution. It does not want it, and it struggles against it. Evolution can be necessary only to man himself when he realizes his position, realizes the possibility of changing this position, realizes that he has powers that he does not use, riches that he does not see. And in the sense of gaining possession of these powers and riches, evolution is possible. But if all men, or most of them, realize this and desire to obtain what belongs to them by right of birth, evolution would again become impossible. What is possible for individual man is impossible for the masses. In speaking of evolution, it is necessary to understand from the outset that no mechanical evolution is possible. The evolution of man is the evolution of his consciousness, and consciousness cannot evolve unconsciously. The evolution of man is the evolution of his will, and will cannot evolve involuntarily. The evolution of man is the evolution of his power of doing, and doing cannot be the result of things which happen. In other words, doing comes from the wellspring of your self-creation and not as a reaction to anything that happens. So Gurdjieff's four bodies, as he stated himself, is just the common repeated theme through many ancient teachings that man must understand himself, must have self-awareness, must strive and struggle to control himself and own himself, and truly come to know his self, his will, his desires, and where they spring from, and what the possibilities of his four bodies in tune with each other can become. And when you know what you can become, when you truly know this, and you truly have mastered and owned these four bodies, and they're in unison with each other, then you can become that which your will manifests, what yourself knows who you should be. And this is what Gurdjieff was trying to preach with his doctrine on the four bodies.